Welcome to Beyond the Backlog. I'm Nick.
And I'm Zack.
And today we'll go over our July in gaming. We have some pickups, we have some beats. What do you think? Start with the pickups?
Sure. First off, let's just address if there was any games that came out in July that piqued our interest. And for me, the only one that did at this point, we're recording this in August, so I do own it, but I didn't pick it up in July, and that is the Nintendo World Championships NES edition.
Yep.
And I think it's kind of like a perfect summer game because it is one you just kind of play for a little bit each day when you have time, and that's about it.
Yeah, just before plans or anything like that.
But that came out in July. I'm going to be talking about it next month, though. In terms of July, though, what did you pick up?
For July, we had all of the summer sales, right? So we had the Steam sale, PlayStation sale, all of that. Mm-hmm. I picked up a bunch of stuff on Steam, really. I picked up Geometry Dash, which is like one of those quick little platformer type of things, right?
Yep.
The classic Fear trilogy, which is an old like horror shooter from the PlayStation 3, I think all three games were.
Yeah, I own all three, but I've never played them.
Oh, we used to play the first one and the third one, because I think the third was co-op.
Depending who you ask, I think there's different opinions on which are the best and worst of the trilogy there.
Absolutely. It's one of those series where it gets different as it goes on. Mm-hmm. I picked up a game called Grip Combat Racing, which is a little like indie racing game. It's kind of like those flip cars from the 90s where you just like push them and then they go up against the wall and they go back.
Okay.
That was kind of what it reminded me of, but it's more like your F-Zero style racing.
Like, is there any sort of anti-gravity-ness to it?
No, just a little racing game.
Cool.
But the controls were actually really quite good for PC especially. Case of the Golden Idol, which we'll talk about later because I did beat it in July. This game called Chance of Sinar, which is a cool like language game where you have to kind of discover the language as you're playing through the game and figure out what the words mean.
Okay.
And then three games I pick up in like a friend's perspective. So I didn't really pick it up as much for myself, but because I have friends of mine that would play it with me. That's going to be Roots of Pacha, which is like Stardew Valley, but set prehistoric times. Don't Starve Together, which is one of those classic like survival games.
Yeah, I actually have Don't Starve Together on Steam, so feel free to hit me up.
Absolutely. And then Warhammer 40k Darktide, which is kind of like a Left 4 Dead type of thing, but in the Warhammer 40k universe.
Okay.
So a lot of them, so try to rapid fire those, but they should be good.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I picked up quite a few things as well. Two of them I did beat in July, and those were games that came out in June. So the new Super Monkey Ball Banana Rumble, as well as Luigi's Mansion 2 HD. Mm-hmm. And while I was at it, kind of picking up games that we've talked about coming out this year, I also got Endless Ocean Luminous.
Yep.
Strictly just to say I have it because I feel like that's going to be one's going to be rare one day. And then on the Steam Summer Sale, I did grab a fair number of pretty cheap games, but the two I wanted to mention, because again, we talked about them already on our monthly recaps, and that is Killer Frequency.
Yep.
So now I can finally give that a shot, and Pacific Drive, because that one just always really stood out to me.
It was on my list and I just kind of cut it out. I tend to do an amount that I spend on the Steam games and it just didn't quite get there.
It's like literally every time I look at that game, I'm thinking, man, I would love to just go explore that Pacific Northwest, but have this weird looming threat kind of pushing you forward, but it's never really like a scary game, you know?
Yeah, it feels like, I can't remember the game. There's a survival game set in the Canadian wilderness.
Death Road to Canada, maybe?
No,
probably not.
I can see if I can find it.
But beyond that, I also just went to the local game store and picked up a few cheap Wii and DS games, just to kind of like Brain Age and stuff like that I had as a kid.
Yep.
That I just was like, why not own it if it's only going to be $1 or $2 at the store? But beyond that, think we are ready to move on to the actual games that we did beat. I believe you're going to talk about 4 today.
I'm going to talk about 4, so I will start it.
So you're going to start us off.
So the first one, I just had a quick little blurb on my game to beat for July in my 12 and 12. That was iNinja, which was a little action game that I had on GameCube, but it also came out on like the PS2 and Xbox, I think it was. your classic, just release it on every console back in the day, right? It's fun. It held up better than like when I was going through the Sonic games, or the Sega games, I should say. Right? Like your Sonic Adventure and your Billy Hatcher, where I just thought were actively bad. This game kind of still holds up. But I think the main issue is just I'm not a fan of these kind of games.
Like 3D platformers, or like...
It was just kind of like an action type of thing. So my comparison would be something like Darksiders.
Okay.
Which was a fun game. I enjoyed my time with it, but there's nothing that made me go, that was great. I want to like go back and play it again, or it's on the top of some favorite games lists, things like that. I just couldn't get that. And I think that's just a stylistic thing.
I did check out like 5 minutes of gameplay, and I'm like, it looks like the Star Wars trilogy CGI the entire time, which is kind of funny. But I was impressed by just like the variety of moves. Like it almost has like Prince of Persia type, like you can run on walls, you can climb over things. So it looked like it was a good variety of just basic moves at your disposal. It's a
good variety of stuff to do. And while I was looking into it, they actually are the same team that did the original Star Fox.
Oh, yeah. Like they made the Super FX chip, right?
Yeah. Which is really neat. But I think it's just more of a overarching feeling of the games I like to play. It's the same reason why I haven't gotten into Bayonetta, because I feel like that's going to be the same thing.
And that's where every time you talk about any of these platformers or just like kind of hack and slash action games, and you're like, it was kind of mid, and I am up in arms. Like, so something tells me iNinja would be right up my alley.
I think so. It's a good one. But that was just a quick little one. I'm trying to maintain my 12 and 12 of the ones that I said way back in that video we released, I don't know when.
All right. Well, my first one that I'm going to talk about is my 12 and 12. And my RPG that I beat in July was Xenoblade Chronicles. I originally set out to do the third one.
Yes.
But I realized I actually hadn't crossed the original off my list yet. And I saw like 50 hours into that before I gave up. And over the past like 2 months, I've just been chipping away at the intro bit, because it's the kind of game where 20 hours in is when everything kind of clicks and you're finally able to just roam free. But this whole idea of being this boy who lives on like the foot of this giant mechanical thing, and all of the world you explore is exploring like the body of the Mechonis versus the Bionis. Like you start on the Bionis, and then you literally like cross the point where their swords touch, and they're these giant planet-sized robots that were just fighting in a big void of space thousands of years ago. And I think it's just such a cool setting and a very unique way to just like begin a game and begin a franchise.
Yeah.
And the core sort of like Western style of RPG, where it's not so much turn-based, but is very very button input heavy. I liked that, but there is also the option to just kind of let it auto battle for you, and you could win most battles without having to touch the controller.
Yeah,
they just go a lot slower.
The type of people that want to see the story and then not care as much about the intricacies of the combat, right?
And I've seen people put that down as a problem with this game, is that the game could literally play itself. And I think revisiting the first one after having beaten the second one as well really reminded me that the gameplay was improved significantly moving ahead. But the thing that really stands out of this one, and the reason I would absolutely recommend it now to people that want to get into the series, is the characters. Like, I loved Xenoblade Chronicles 2, but nothing is going to compare to like Shulk and Ryan together, just like two buddies going on an adventure. And it's just this fantastic feeling of like camaraderie, because you spend a solid 40 hours after you've already got your full party, just learning about all of them. There's literally like multiple full movies worth of cutscenes exploring these characters. And it's just, there's so much character and story to it, but it's a long game.
Yeah.
Long game. So I think, I actually played it on my 3DS, which is probably the worst way to play it. But if you can find it on the Wii, it's gone down from those astronomical prices it had before it got ported and remastered. But if you can find it on Switch, the definitive edition, before that starts going up in price, I would highly recommend this one too.
Yeah, that's one that I've got that's just sitting on my list of RPGs to beat. Because as more of the RPG guy, they're long. So I only try to do a couple a year, but they're so good.
Absolutely. And that's where I think because I kind of took it easy the month before, I was able to start playing an RPG much sooner. And for some reason, Paper Mario just didn't like hook me in within like the first hour or two. So I'm still just waiting on that.
I think that's fair. I don't think I've ever beat Thousand Year Door. I think it was the same kind of issue where I just kind of fell out of it. And the thing with RPGs that I've found is once you fall out, you can't really go back in.
And there is something to be said about having like a cast of like 8 named characters that follow you their entire journey versus personality of a bunch of toads and like Goombas.
Yeah, different styles.
Different style of like injecting personality.
Yeah.
But anyway.
And speaking of different styles, my next one is the game that I did pick up in July there, The Case of the Golden Idol. It's a 2022 like adventure puzzle game. It's like a point and click in the style of those old 90s Sierra games, or late 80s, I guess.
Just curiosity, because you're saying point and click and you're saying Golden Idol. Does it have anything to do with the Adventures of Monkey Island?
I want to say that's some of the similarities.
Okay.
I've seen a little bit of Monkey Island, but I never played it. But I was seeing a lot of comparisons. What I tend to do during the Steam sales is I look up recommendations and then just add a bunch to the wish list and kind of filter through. But I was seeing a lot of comparisons to the Return of the Obra Dinn.
And again, I checked this one out for like 5 minutes. And in that 5 minutes, the Return of Obra Dinn was mentioned.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, exactly. So point and click, there's 2 different modes that you can go into. One is the classic, you have to hover and try to find the important bits of information. Whereas the one that I did, which was just your cursor lights up when it's the important bit. So you're not just mad tapping on the screen for everything. But how it kind of works is you get the snapshot of the character's death, and you have to go around and try to figure out who did it, who all the people are, how the scene played out, any type of specific scene kind of plays that they're going on there. So an example is there are some people in one of the scenes playing poker, and you see like their big bar tab at the corner there, and you have to figure out who got what for the bar tabs as the night went on, just to kind of add to looking through a couple of things. So you can complete each of the sections individually. So if you find out the names of all the characters, they lock each other in. And then any of the words that are only there are just eliminated from your little pool that you picked up. And then you do that with all the sections, you figure out what happened, and then you go on to the next scene. But it followed a big overarching story. So you kind of took the journey of the Golden Idol over the course of like 60 years, I think is what it was. Just in different snapshots of it to kind of see the story of it.
But is it like the same characters recurring throughout?
Pretty well, yeah.
Year span?
Yeah, so you could see and you could kind of use that to your advantage in the next scenes. Because you're like, oh, okay, I know this person because this guy was in like the second scene, and now we're in scene 5 or 6, so I already know this guy's name. So you kind of have all that, and then the cases all tie up into each other. I tend to like in deduction games when you have little bits. It's why I really liked Obra Dinn, is you figured out what happened to 3 people, and then when you were right with those 3, it would just complete themselves. And because Case of the Golden Idol does that with its sections, it makes it a lot more appealing than just, I don't know if I'm missing 1 thing, 5 things, 8 things, I don't know.
Now, if this one is 12 deaths, you said? Or 12 cases?
I think it was 8 cases.
8 cases. And Oberdin was 60, right?
Yes. So Oberdin is you're finding what happened to the 60 people.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say Case of the Golden Idol took me longer to do.
Okay.
With the 8 cases. Because I think Curse of the Oberdin took me about 6 hours, I think, the first time I played it. This one took me 8 or 9.
Just a little more fleshed out scenarios.
And it was a little bit harder to discover it. Because with the Oberdin one, it was very much, you had some easy ones that could kind of go through.
And there was also ones where it was like multiple people in the same spot at the same time. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I just found that cutting it up into smaller portions helped me try to like keep an eye and keep a handle on how the game was going. But that one was a lot more fun than I thought it would be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, even when I just looked at it, obviously those Oberdin comparisons were the first thing I thought of.
Yeah.
And again, I thought, man, I would really love to sit down and explore this world, because something about that pixel art style really makes me focus on the story a lot and like the characters a lot.
Yes. It's one of those weird quirks of it, where it's certain types of animations really go to it. As a bit of an aside, it's why I don't like chibi art, because I find that takes me out of everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's where I can totally acknowledge like most mobile phone games are video games. It's just the art style on them just does not do it for me a lot of the time. But anyway, moving on to my second game, which is one I purchased in July and played through in July, and that is the latest in the Super Monkey Ball series, and that is Banana Rumble.
This is going to be interesting for me, because I really like the Monkey Ball series, other than when it got really bad.
The only one I actually genuinely don't like is the ones on Wii where you're supposed to motion control.
Those are the exact ones I was thinking.
So prior to this, the last game to come out was Banana Mania, which I think was last year. And that one was essentially just Monkey Ball Deluxe, where it was all the stages from like 1 and 2 just kind of redone. Most of the games, like pretty much the greatest hits of the mini games from the first 2 as well.
Yep.
Just redone, repackaged. And I was kind of disappointed by that, because if you're charging like a full price game price for it, and there's no new levels, and I own all the old games, so I can play them just fine already. But I did like how this one went for just an entirely, like, this is a brand new Monkey Ball game, and the added mechanic is the dash. And at first, it seems like, oh, this is kind of a cheap way to create some weird shortcuts and whatnot. And if you hit a wall really fast and bounce off it and can like get over an obstacle or a gap. But the more I went on, the more I realized it wasn't just a cheap tool. It was literally giving you options on how to do stages however you want. Like, if a lot of these stages are so long that you might barely have enough time to finish it in a minute.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're using the dash and aiming it at like the biggest platforms below you, you can have much safer, like faster route. Like, you're supposed to do that. And once I kind of caught on to it, and that the stages are like built from the ground up around the dash, I started loving it. And I genuinely think this is my favorite Monkey Ball game.
Okay.
Like, bar none. I think this is my favorite of them. It also helps that there's 200 all new stages. Like, that's a good number.
Yeah.
And when you beat the first 100, the credits roll, and I was like, okay, like same amount of stages as all the previous ones, but the stages were better, longer, had more just like versatility to how you can approach them. And then when I realized, oh wait, the credits are going to roll, and then I unlock the harder set of stages, and like, it was like, by the time I was getting to stage like 180, 190, there was some I was taking 20, 30 tries to beat. And it really hooked me in. Like, it is just a Monkey Ball game for everyone. The mini games are top notch. And the main feature that is named after is an online mode where it's like I think 12 people playing through challenges. I haven't even tried that yet. And I still think this is a fantastic game. I might even just go pop that in tonight just to give it a try, because the more I'm hyping it up and talking about it, the more I want to play it again. And it's been a few weeks now at this point since I played it, but I do want to try that online mode as well, just to see how that is. But even if there was no main flagship online mode that the game was based around, this would still be worth, I think, the full price.
Yeah, because like the thing with the Monkey Ball games, especially the first two, was that it was just like fun little quick stages that you could go through.
They felt more like remnants of arcade games getting ported to console.
Yeah.
But they were made like for console first.
Yeah.
Whereas this just felt like...
This felt like a console game.
Yeah. Like this feels like a fully fledged console game.
Interesting. Because that's the fun part with the Monkey Ball. Yeah.
Yeah. And also just the fact like they added in a bunch of characters and even just, as I said, comparing it to the game that came out on all those same platforms the year before, they just went from just copy paste to like, this is literally just so good. I wonder if they're working on it at the same time though, because it seems like a really quick turnaround. But anyway, that's just random sidebar thought. You may continue.
We're getting into my last two games will also be a Zack gush portion of it.
Ooh, boy, will it ever.
Yep. So after my scathing indictment of Uncharted 1, I went immediately into Uncharted 2 and had a much better time.
Okay. I like where this is heading.
Yeah. So I would say pretty well all the critiques that I had were answered between the two. And I think that bodes well for Uncharted 2 and not as well for Uncharted 1. It's like the enemy spawns made more sense. The setting was a lot better. I got a little bit more of an idea on the controls. The controls just felt more fluid. And then it just came to realize that I think when people think about the Uncharted games, I think they focus on the good ones. Right? Because the first game just feels more like a tech demo after playing the second game.
Mm-hmm. I mean, at the time that 2 came out, 1 had already established itself as like one of the best looking and playing games on PlayStation 3.
Yeah.
So people were excited for 2 when it came out.
No, exactly. And then I think if I had played it back then, it would have just blown out everything out of the water. And that's where people have Uncharted 2 as their favorite game.
And I think Uncharted 2 even makes my top 20 games of all time.
Mm-hmm.
Because I when I compare it to 1, I'm thinking the story is just told better. The cutscenes are improved. Like the lighting, which was already fantastic, is improved. The textures, which were already fantastic, got improved. Like the actual like setting is more expanded. Instead of just being one island, you're like going from like place to place and piecing together a worldwide puzzle. Like it's just so grand in scope, and I love it.
Mm-hmm. No, I would agree with all of those. It was good. Like the story was great. I always like the archaeology type of thing, right? You know, growing up watching Indiana Jones or anything like that. My prior engagement playing the Tomb Raider series, it's the same kind of style, the Assassin's Creeds. I like those kind of games. So having Uncharted 2 kind of get closer to how I see those games is much better. Mm-hmm. I had to stop myself from immediately playing the third because I felt I needed to space it out and not just like ram through an entire trilogy in like the span of 2 months.
Yeah, and I genuinely think the reason I don't consider 3 as highly as 2 is because I played them back to back. Mm-hmm. And when I'm playing them back to back, I was like, oh, 3 is literally just all the improvements 2 made, but let's amp all of the action up to 11 at all times.
Yeah. I could definitely see that because I think I do the same thing with the Tomb Raider series, but like flipped. I did Tomb Raider 1 into the second one and then just don't remember really anything about the first Tomb Raider game of like that remade trilogy.
Yeah. And like genuinely until I replayed Uncharted 1, I forgot all about it, but 2 is always going to stick in my head. Like those like Tibetan mountains in Nepal.
Yeah. No, that area was great. Like I did like the travel of it. I think that's the one thing that this game does that none of the other ones really do, right? Like Assassin's Creed is a city pretty well. At least like the earlier ones.
Even in like 3, when you go between 3 different cities, it feels like they divided the content across 3 cities.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't feel as global, right? And Tomb Raider kind of does the same thing. You've got little vignettes, I'd almost call them, in other areas, but your main story takes place in one big area. I did like it. I don't have the same grandiose opinions that I think most other people do, because I still rate Tomb Raider above it. But I think I like this better than the first Tomb Raider.
Well, what was the score you gave the first Uncharted?
I think I gave it a 3.
I want to say you said 4 out of 10.
Yeah, 3 or 4. I would say this one's a 7.
Because I was going to say anything below a 7 for like the first Uncharted, I was ready to throw arms about.
Yeah,
and I would say anything below a 9 for this one, I would throw arms over as well.
Yeah, and I would probably call it a 7, maybe an 8.
All right. Well, if you don't hear from Nick in the next episode, you know what happened.
Yeah,
arms were thrown.
Multiples of them.
All right. And my last game that I wanted to talk about, which I was very conflicted about originally, is Luigi's Mansion 2 HD.
I believe you said you weren't even going to pick it up.
I did not plan on picking it up because I had already played the 3DS version, subtitled Dark Moon in North America, several times to 100% completion. Like on my 3DS, I'm pretty sure I'm close to 100 hours spent in Luigi's Mansion 2. So I'm like, what is there to experience in 2 HD that I haven't already? And then I picked it up on a whim. I just popped it in to play for a little bit. And guess what? I played the entire game and I love it. It is so good. And it wasn't until I looked back at 3DS footage of the game being played where I actually genuinely had like a wow. When you put Luigi Mansion 2 HD next to 3 on the Switch, and I would argue 3 is like one of the best looking games on the Switch in terms of particle effects and lighting and shadows. It is one of, if not the best looking game. And 2 HD managed to take a now 11-year-old game and make it look almost as good. Like if 3 is a 10 out of 10 for me, just on like presentation and style, 2 HD is a solid 9 out of 10 at the very least. But it reminded me just how much detail there is packed into these different mansions, and the fact that this is 5 different places to visit. I think the only gripe in general I have about 2 versus the others in the series is just the structure of the missions.
Yep.
And how it just kind of forces you out to... The in-game canonical reason is to empty your vacuum before it gets too full. But then it's like, why can I only fit 7 in the first time, but 100 in the last time? Anyway, barring that and that need to re-enter and kind of go through a lot of the same rooms on repeat and just kind of pad out the game that way, just the overall feeling playing this game, just the kind of creepy, crawly vibe of the first mansion, the kind of overgrown ivy vibe of the second mansion. You get into, it's like just these perfect characters of different horror themes. Even though it's not a scary horror game, it perfectly encapsulates 5 different horror themes.
Okay.
And you're playing through them, and it makes a lot of sense how it's laid out. It just makes a lot of sense what goes where. Like you're missing a little bit of that personality in the ghosts because you don't have like 50 different portrait ghosts to hunt down and capture. It's not like how every floor in 3 had a different boss, and there's 15 bosses there.
And like different themes kind of associated with it.
So it's 5 just fully explored themes, and I love it for that. And if you've never played 2 before, you have to play all 3. I think all 3 stand up as just individually being fantastic games, each with their own merit. If you've already played 2, you probably don't need this one, though. I am a Luigi's Mansion super fan, I'll say, and I'm really, really glad I picked it up. And if you have any inkling like I do that you might enjoy it, go for it. But if you've already played 2 on the 3DS, you don't need this one. And that's where I'm going to leave it there.
Yeah, I think it gives it a second opportunity.
Mm-hmm. And I do hope that it'll lead to more in the future.
Okay.
Like a fourth Luigi's Mansion that maybe tries that idea of like 5 new mansions again, something like that. But
I'd almost want them to do a little village.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Right, because then you can get back all like the personalities of the ghosts from the first game. Just you're going to different houses and cleaning them up.
Mm-hmm. And it's strange how each of the 3 games does variety well, just in a totally different way.
Yes, absolutely. And we've got the final game that we'll talk about here. I went on vacation, visited some family, and during the downtime, I played Super Mario Wonder. And it was good.
More like wonderful.
Yeah, my first comment was, what a game.
I mean, he doesn't usually message me just to say, hey, I've been playing this game. But after we made our top Mario list, which you should go check out, and I vouched for it to be pretty high up on that list. After he played it, he was like, you know what? You were right.
Yeah. Well, because you kind of get beaten down by the 2D Mario games of the last, 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
Right? Because they feel samey because they are. So having, a brand new world, brand new abilities, brand new everything just felt refreshing. And it was just fun. That's the thing that, they do really well. And I was talking to a friend of mine who doesn't like the Mario games in general. I was like, I can get that, but if you're a platformer kind of fan, you have to play the Mario games. Because it's not that they're the skill intensive or anything like that. It's just they're fun.
And most of the ideas they bring are what gets emulated and iterated upon to give you the best of 2D and other spaces.
Exactly. I would think the one that wouldn't really compare to the other ones is climbing. So I don't think any Mario platformers really climb. You have the cape in Mario World, but I would argue that it wouldn't be that. But
you got ladders and vines at most.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I'm thinking more the Celeste, Super Metroid kind of thing, which Super Metroid, same, it's Nintendo. Nintendo does its thing really well. But the stages were really well made. The music was great. The difficulty scaled well. I really enjoyed the little pocket levels as well.
Mm-hmm. Just a little, here's a 30-second challenge.
Yeah, get the badge, use the badge, and then do that. The little mysteries that they've got there. It was just fun. I was playing it with my cousins, so you just toss the controller around every so often, and that went well. Keeps it engaging.
Mm-hmm. And even if you are looking for that extra challenge, there's built-in badges to the game that allow you to make it harder, influencing how well you can jump or turning you into a spring, which is just obnoxious.
Yep.
And I think that gives it a little extra replay value.
And then getting everything and getting all the coins, getting all the badges.
And I don't know what your experience was playing it more recently, but was there constantly other figures online showing up? Or
I don't know if I played online.
Okay. Because I was going to say, that gave me a real sense of I was playing it with other people, even though it was just kind of shadows that would occasionally pop up in the level while I was playing it.
And hit a block or something, right? Kind of.
Not necessarily. There was some ghosts ones like that, or people can leave little signposts saying jump here or something. But I just mean you'd be going through a level, see somebody that's just struggling, falling over and over. You do the thing, and then they're like, "Oh, watch!" And then they come and do that. And if you just stand there, now you're oh, let's go finish the level together.
It's like a reverse FromSoft,
right?
Yeah. Instead of seeing where everyone died, and you're like, "Oh, something bad's coming up." It's "Oh, this is how you do it." That's really cool. I would just end off saying it's probably my mid-round contender for favorite game I played this year.
Oh, okay.
There's a couple of them, but that's definitely...
Yeah, it was an easy top 10 for me last year.
End of year, it'll probably make the list.
Yeah, and I think it might not be as revolutionary as Odyssey or like Breath of the Wild is in terms of taking old 2D games and breathing new life into them and having like this big 3D space to wander around. It's just a pure fun arcade style, like, and I love that Nintendo still does that.
And I think it's just that's what makes it kind of refreshing is it gives you that pocket sense of dopamine, right? It's the same reason why everyone likes the TikToks and things like that, right? It's just quick little bursts of energy. Whereas Mario games have kind of always done that.
And I think adding in, as you said, like those little short levels really helped make it the pacing a lot better. Gave me more of that sense of like that Odyssey style of pacing where it's like you're accomplishing something, getting like a moon every minute or so if you're efficient. And same thing here, like there's a stage that takes you 3 minutes to beat, but then you get a quick 30-second one, a minute-long one. So it's just like constantly feeding you like, you did it.
Yeah. And you're like, I did do it. Let's play more.
Exactly.
But I think that's it. That's all.
Yeah, you listened. So, you can always listen some more.
Exactly. It was a decent-sized month gaming-wise.
Even though like nothing came out, I think I had a little more space to focus on. Let's play the games that have come out recently that I really wanted to dig into.
Well, that's what helps us beat the backlog, right?
Yeah,
if there's something that you don't really care about for a month, you go, okay, that's perfect, because that gives me time to knock down 3 or 4 solid games off the list, right?
Exactly.
But we'll see you next time. And
see you for an August recap.
Care.
Thanks for listening.